Let's see, it's 4:46. Marianne and I have been talking for the last half hour. And anyway, it's good to see you all. Of course, I can't see you, but I'm assuming that you can see me. And a lot of interesting things happening. First, I want to talk about the site and the problems we've been having. We haven't found a solution yet, but Marianne is working with a new person, a person that has some expertise in this area beyond the people we're working with, and we hope to have a solution. I don't know what the problem is because I have never dealt with Justin TV. We might end up going to some other source other than Justin. We might. Another possibility is that I'm anticipating some funds. I call it God's money being made available to me, to our foundation, The Great Tomorrow, and with those funds, I'll be able to. The Great Tomorrow will be able to provide any additional income that Justin needs in order to meet any requirements they have, far beyond any requirements they have. In fact, we could buy Justin TV. So one way or the other, I anticipate that within the next 2 or 3 weeks, the matter will be resolved. Either by finding some other source other than Justin, or we'll just provide additional funding to Justin for whatever reason that they're holding back, giving us some of the things that we anticipated that we were entitled to or were going to receive in the past. So I thank you for your patience, and I'm wondering if it's not possible that one of you might have a camera on your iPhone or on your phone, that you could actually do an audio. You could tape the audio as well as the visual of the show, and then email that to Mariana, and she could create I didn't discuss it with you, but it just came to me just now while we're talking. And then she could turn around, if you email it to her, she could take that video and audio and put it on a separate tab on the right-hand side. So it's kind of sort of like an archive. Mariana, would you think about that if that's a technical possibility? Because I don't have a background in that area, but if someone has that ability to be able to do that with your phone, that has both the ability to capture a audio and visual for an hour of the show and then email it to her, maybe we could do it that way. At any rate, I'd like to talk to you about the tour. A lot's happened since we last talked to you. We're tentatively looking at the weekend of May 27th in Los Angeles to have our first show. No, Joshua doesn't want to call it a show. He wants to call it a gathering. I think that's what he said. He wants to call it a gathering. I got a message from him this morning. I think he called myself and my colleagues a team. He said Nick and his team, meaning Nadine and Robbie and Steve Allen. Well, we're all teammates, so I guess it's a team. It's not my team, but we're all teammates. So I guess he could have said my teammates. I would prefer that rather than being my team. And he said he said rather than calling it a show, Nick, I'd like to call it a gathering. So at any rate, aside from that, we're talking about the weekend. First show would be, the first gathering would be on May 27th in Los Angeles that weekend. And we're not going to charge any money for we agreed collectively as a group, my teammates and I, that we allow people to make reservations. And the reason we want to make reservations, in case some of you flew in from out of state or drove up from, let's say, where Bonnie lives, from a different part of California, we wanted to make sure that you had seats available to you by making reservations. But we're not actually charge a ticket fee to get in. It would be strictly on the basis of donation. And our feeling is this: we don't want to have anybody not come because they felt they can't afford it, saying that I need a healing, or I want to see a spiritual show, or I need some help, or whatever, and they say I can't afford the ticket. So this way they can come without feeling embarrassed because there's no charge, although they'd have to have a reservation. But we know that other people that will give substantial donations for if they have a healing. They might have a healing of cancer or diabetes or alcoholism or whatever. And even though it's by donation, they might choose to donate $500, $200, $100, as opposed to charging a $25 ticket. So we feel it all even out. So there won't be any actual fee, and there will be reservations so that any of you that are coming from out of state, are flying in from out of state or driving up for that May 27th being our first gathering, will be guaranteed then that you'll have, there will be seats available for you. Because if we have, let's say our venue holds, they feel they want to hold it at one place that they felt 2,000 people, and I'm disagreeing with them. I don't think 2,000 is going to be enough when you take in consideration that there's media involved, there's going to be there's going to be advertising. I'm going to hopefully do some radio interviews. I pointed out to them that, and then there are going to be those of you who fly in from out of town or at least drive up that are within driving distance in California. And I tried to explain to them that I can remember when I was down in Miami, and there was one article in a Miami newspaper 3 weeks before I was doing a book show, a bookstore signing, and over 1,000 people showed up. They had to actually put the sound system on the outside of the street because people couldn't get, some people had to listen to my 45-minute discussion or presentation out on the street. And I can remember being in Naples, Florida, where I gave one radio interview at Fort Myers, which is about a half-hour drive from Naples, and it was a 3-hour presentation at the Unity Church in Naples, and the police actually had to come and direct traffic away from the parking lot because of maximum capacity. It's only 1,400 people, and some people actually drove down from New Hampshire. I realized that was back when my book was a bestseller, but my point is that taking into consideration those of you that are on the website, on our site, that might want to be there, and the local advertising, and the interviews I'll be doing, and people wanting to come to get healings, I just think that I disagreed with everybody else that said that they felt 2,000 should be the first one, and they said it's okay if it's oversold. That just makes more demand. But I don't feel that way. I think that I suggested we go into maybe a ballroom or a convention center where they have those sliding doors that can open and make another section available if the seating gets larger. So that's what I'm shooting for, that it could hold 3,000 or 4,000 people and could make it larger if necessary by having sliding doors. So that's where we are on our tour, and we'll keep you posted. I also decided that Laurie Jones would also be invited. I went to the chapel today that I go to in Lake Oswego, and Laurie Jones was singing there. And I thought she was magnificent. So I met with Laurie and told her that there's going to be 3 singers rather than just 2. In addition to Nadine Richard and Robbie Brett, Laurie also will be with us. And she was just magnificent today. And I told, I've already emailed Robbie and Nadine and told them that Laurie would be joining us also. So, and Laurie was thrilled. She was thrilled. I saw her down at a place where we drink coffee and tea, and downstairs below the chapel. So that gives you an update regarding the tour and the site. And that's not too bad. It only took me 10 minutes. I'm going to have a little drink right now of my ginger ale and Angostura bitters. And I want to go back where we left off with the questions that you were asking me about Yeshua. I couldn't go through them all last week, and then you sent me some new ones. So I have them right in front of me, the questions. I just took them out of random in terms of which ones I'm going to ask first. And the first one came from Randy. He says, Nick, I have a question. Since we've come to learn that the New Testament has been altered and distorted, what are we to think of the so-called second coming of Christ? Was the whole concept stuck in there to use, I'm going to change the word placed in there, correcting your English, was the whole concept placed in there to use as a fear tactic? How do we know? Question mark. Well, first of all, as far as the second coming of Christ, it's important to understand that at the time before Joshua was born on earth, Judaic religion believed that a Messiah would come who would lead them from bondage from the Romans physically by sword, not by peace and love, literally by a sword, that he'd be a military leader. And they did have a couple that were military leaders and were killed and caught by the Romans and were also crucified. One of them actually came from Galilee. He was called Simon the Zealot, Z-E-A-L-T. But Joshua, that wasn't the role Joshua played. As we know that he did not come with a sword in hand. He came saying that render to Caesar what is Caesar's, because he believed in universal compassion, universal love. And he did not want to have combat. He felt that we could possibly win the hearts of people through showing love and compassion, which didn't work with the Romans. But at any rate, after Joshua was crucified, they believed throughout his lifetime that he'd have a second coming, and this time he'd come with a sword. It's in Revelation. If you read Revelation, he said, the time has come. The man in Revelation, John, who wrote it in the island of Ptolemy, where he was a prisoner by the Romans, he was a Jew, and in Revelation he said that the time has almost come where Christ would appear again, and he'd come with a sword in his hand. If you think I'm making this up, I'm just speaking ad-libbing to you, but if you think I'm how should I say, I'm speculating, I would suggest read Revelation, and you see he said the time is almost here, meaning in his lifetime. All of them thought that he was coming in his lifetime. In every generation of people, they thought Jesus was coming, Joshua was coming in their lifetime. Back in the Second World War, they thought Joshua was coming in his lifetime. There isn't any period of history the church of people didn't believe Joshua was coming in their lifetime. Whether it was 1852, 1721, I don't care when. He was always around the corner coming in their lifetime. So, to answer your question, when you say we've come to learn the New Testament's been altered and distorted, we think the so-called second coming of Christ, that's where the second coming of Christ, which I don't like to call it, he had reached Christ's consciousness. It would be a second coming of Joshua, not of Christ. Joshua was the Christ, meaning he had reached Christ's consciousness. He didn't change from Jesus to some other person. It was Yeshua who had reached Christ's consciousness, ascended to that level. So the answer to your question is the fact that no, it wasn't done for fear. Maybe it was done really for thinking that it would cause a great transition in the world if Joshua came again, as opposed to in the early years, the first few hundred years, when they thought he was coming with a sword in hand, before the Roman Empire was started. I mean, before it became the Christian religion. Obviously, the Romans didn't think he was coming with a sword in hand, because he would have been coming with a sword in hand, such in Revelation, in order to defeat the Romans. I hope I haven't confused you too much. But anyway, that's the answer to the question. This comment comes from Richard. It says, Nick, in your last book, you pointed out how Yeshua apparently did not say, let he who was without sin cast the first stone. In that vein is a story about the pigs going off the cliff too. I don't know anything about pigs going off a cliff, because if that's it, I've only read the New Testament once and I don't remember that part. But I will tell you this about, I said it's not true that Joshua said he who who was without sin cast the first stone. And the reason I say that is because in the original four Gospels, they're written in Aramaic. The original ones, in the original Aramaic and Greek, did not have that story in it. Did not. Never mentioned. Mary wasn't a prostitute. Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. If you recall the story, they're insinuating that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute, and that people were going to throw stones at her. And Joshua said, "Whoever's without sin, cast the first stone." Everybody backed off and put their stones down. First of all, Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. The story is total BS. I'm sorry. The story was fabricated. The story was created in the 4th century. I don't know what for purpose. It was added on because if one were to get hold of the original writings that were written in Aramaic and Greek of the New Testament, they would find that the story was not in there. I think it was in the Gospel of Thomas. And that if they were to get a more contemporary one, which was written from the Latin version in the 4th century in Vulgate Latin, translate to English, that the story has been inserted there. I'm sure the analogy is that he was without sin, that you shouldn't judge other people. I totally understand that. And I have no problem with the analogy in the story of the fact that they wanted people to believe that you should not judge others so he who was without sin cast the first stone. But Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. And I don't know why they had to make her into a prostitute in order to make that analogy. But no, that never happened. That scene never happened, and it was placed into the story, into the Gospels in the 4th century to try to give an analogy over that we shouldn't judge other people. I'm assuming that's what they're trying to do. Who knows what the Romans had in mind in the 4th century, but could have been done also that saying that if you commit a sin, they're going to stone you. Or you're going to go to hell. So it could have been, from that perspective, that he who sins, what they call a sin, was going to be punished, be stoned. So it could have been done to put fear into your heart. Again, who knows what their motive was, but I suggest it's a combination perhaps of both, that we shouldn't judge other people, number one, and number two, that if you commit a sin, you're going to be punished by God and go to the proverbial hell, which he created, which, as we all know, was a dump outside of Jerusalem in the Valley of Hinnom 2,000 years ago that burnt every day, and was the word Gehenna, which the English translation was the word hell. And here I go off into a tangent again. But I think I've answered your question about that. Joshua never said that. It's a good question, Richard. Thank you. Next question I have is from Linda O, as opposed from Linda L. What are the issues that Joshua is most concerned with in present time? Apprentices. I intend that this answer might help us illuminate similar issues that we can work on as individuals today. End of parentheses. I added a word today. What are the issues that Joshua is most concerned with in present time? I think it has to do with us wanting the whole world, everybody, to accept universal love and universal compassion. It covers so much ground. So much ground. If we all accepted the concept and belief and lived our lives embracing universal love and universal compassion. Would there be any hungry children in the world? Would there be children without water? Would we have any wars in the world? Would we have governments spending hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars a year for weapons of mass destruction? If we had universal love and universal compassion in the world? Would we have totally different leaders in the world that we have now? What leader in the world do you know of within our own government Can you say, no, I don't even want to go there. Some of you are going to say, we're getting politics. Some of you are going to say, so-and-so has got compassion and love for the people. Someone else is going to say that the person's callous and has to care less and strictly good. So let's not go there. Let's just say that I think Yeshua would say that universal love and universal compassion is a panacea, a cure for almost everything that happens in the world. All the heartache, all the suffering, all the hungry children in the world. Universal love. I'm not talking about unconditional love. I'm talking about universal love and universal compassion. To have love for everybody. In fact, that was a theme in our chapel today that Reverend Barbara, what I call Sparkles, because she wears little sparkles on her face, her theme was one of love, love everybody. That was a theme today in our chapel in Lake Oswego. If there's anybody listening that was at that chapel service. I think there's 3 or 4 that go to that chapel that watch this show. Watch this. I guess I shouldn't call it a show. I guess I'd call it a gathering. If Joshua wants me to call our Torah a gathering, maybe I'm going to call from now on our Sunday 4-4 as a gathering too. A gathering of kindred spirits, all of us on the same path trying to evolve spiritually, become at one with God in Christ consciousness. A gathering of kindred spirits. Some who are pupils, disciples, comes from the ancient word disciples, meaning pupils, and some who are apostles, meaning teachers, comes from the ancient word apostles. But we all have the same purpose, and that's to evolve spiritually, to try to climb our pyramid of 1,000 steps till we reach the top, to be at one with God in Christ consciousness. I believe that would be what Joshua would be concerned about in our present time, that we continue. I lean forward to read, again, the question, which is in front of me, is that we are committed to live our lives embracing universal love and universal compassion, so that we personally, individually, able to ascend and evolve, to become at one, eventually, with Christ consciousness and God, and also to better the world we live in. Universal love, universal compassion. Covers so much ground. Next question comes from Bonnie. She actually wrote several paragraphs before that, responding to something that Linda O said, and welcoming, anyway, talking about some things that happened in her childhood. But let me go to the question. That wasn't my phone. I have 3 lines in this house, and that was a different line. I put the sound down to 0. Let me go instead to the part where the question comes in. Bonnie says that in her opinion, Joshua and the Christ Spirit are not necessarily the same. Joshua is one with the Christ consciousness, but we all have the Christ vision within us. The second coming may merely be our own alignment with the Christ consciousness as we live in surrender to that which already resides within us. Bonnie, you're so right. I was just saying that. Joshua didn't become the Christ. Joshua became at one with Christ consciousness. And every one of us have the ability to become at one with Christ consciousness. Bonnie, you are so, so right. You are I love your sister. I love everybody. But you are an amazing apostle yourself, amazing teacher. Because she's right. Bonnie says, again, Joshua and the Christ Spirit are not necessarily the same. Joshua was one with the Christ consciousness, but we all have the Christ within us. The second coming may merely be our own alignment with Christ consciousness. Well, the second coming is, I don't agree with the second question, with the second part, but I do agree with the first one, that Joshua did not become Christ. Joshua became at one with Christ consciousness, which he had within him, just as we all have within him. But he was born at one with Christ consciousness, whereas we are trying and striving to ascend and eventually become at one with Christ consciousness. So I think it's important to make that distinction. And for those of you who are watching this on Justin TV, this is not a religious show. This is one that deals with spirituality. My website is called nickbunick.com. Nick Bunick, that's NickBunick.com. If you wanted to come to my website rather than watching it on Justin TV right now, in which I have 26 people, according to my little screen, that are watching this on Justin TV. You're welcome to come join us on our website. At any rate, because sometimes I wonder if they're watching it. They're just skimming through Justin TV, and all of a sudden they see this guy speaking. In this case, I'm wearing a black sweater, and they're wondering, who is this guy? What's he talking about? So I'm addressing them right now. But I'm sorry, I'm addressing those 26 people, which probably maybe is not appropriate, since I know there's thousands of you all over the world right now that are watching the show. But I just felt sensitive to the fact that they might wonder what it is I'm talking about or where I'm coming from. Bunick goes on to say that another opinion many hold is that Joshua is already here in this lifetime as a reincarnated soul, and I hold this belief, but I also believe in soul spirits, and thus a facet of Joshua could be living as a reincarnated soul and still exist in the spirit world. In other words, other facets of him exist, as well as other souls, including yours and mine. And she says, what do you think, Nick? I think that's true. I think that, if you recall, in my book, Time for Truth, I had communicated with a man. Let me look up right now where he's from. I communicated with an individual and he lived in, excuse me, I still have this card here, my Rolodex. Let's just take a second. And he told me that specifically. Here he is. He made his home in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. He made his home in Malaysia when he wasn't traveling. And he said to me, Nick, I am a facet of Joshua. And it's in my book, Time for Truth. I'll even tell you the name he went by. He went by the name of Emmanuel Villa Salvador. Emmanuel Villa Salvador. That was the name he went by. He lived in Kuala Lumpur, which I understand is the capital of Malaysia. And he said to me, he said, Nick, he said, I'm just a facet of Joshua. And when I'm through with my mission, he said, another facet of Joshua will take my place. And he actually was married. And he was married to a young woman. And at that time, she was pregnant, ready to give birth. And he did give birth to a little boy, I'm told. I was told about, anyway, about a year and a half later, he told me. Anyway, I'm going off the tangent. That was 5 years ago. Last time I talked to him, 4 years ago. Maybe 4 years ago. Last time I talked to him on the phone, 3 or 4. And he said to me, it was a wonderful conversation. He said to me, the first thing he said to me was that, I said to him, what do you want me to call you? He said, whatever you're comfortable, Nick. He said, you can call me either Emmanuel, or you can call me Joshua. He said, and he started laughing. I said, why are you laughing? He said, you have exactly the same voice you had 2,000 years ago. And he said, let me talk for a while. He said to me, Nick, he said, before we can teach people spiritual messages, it's so important first we address the needs of the people, the hungry children in the world. It's hard for people to concentrate who are having trouble feeding their children in the part of the world where I am right now, which I guess he was talking about in Malaysia and in Cambodia, where some of those children have barely enough to eat, and they have a tremendous, the average death age is 50 years old in Cambodia. 50 years old, the average male lifespan, and it's 55 for women. And the mortality rate for children are enormous. He said, until we can feed the hungry children in the world, how can we ask people to understand the spiritual messages that we want to share with them? That becomes a higher priority than feeding their children. And one of the missions I have right now is taking place in Laos, where one of our people is growing rice and hemp and creating schools for them, for the children there. One of the people in the Great Tomorrow that's on a mission there. Which I think most of you know about that. But at any rate, he said that 2,000 years ago we came with the messages and they distorted them. Same things he wrote in the letters that you see on my website. They distorted our messages, Nick. He said, this time we have to do it right. And he said something else that was interesting. He said to me, Nick, do you realize that if I made a public appearance as Joshua, think about this in reference to our tour, our Music America's tour. If I made a public appearance as Joshua and I went into a hotel in New York or wherever, can you imagine thousands of people that would stay outside the hotel that would want to touch me or want me to pray for them or want me to do a healing? He said, I would never get out of the hotel. How would I get out of the hotel? And then he says also there'd be those people that would want to kill me. Some loony that would want to get us claim his fame, whether it be a born-again Christian or whatever, or saying would want to take my life, saying because I was a threat to them, just as I was 2,000 years ago to the Romans. He said, no, he said, I'd have to come this time in person. He said, looking totally different. I want to show you a picture of what that man looked like. I didn't intend to do this, but I just happened to look at it the other day. This is what that man looked like. The man I was talking to on the phone. Can you see that? You notice he came with dark skin and a mustache? Now, if I put a beard on him and made his skin lighter, maybe he would have made his eyes blue. Maybe he'd look like Joshua. I don't know. But this is an actual picture of what he looked like. What he looked like when I talked to him on the phone. He sent me this through the email. Try to envision that if he had a mustache and beard. I don't know. At any rate, he didn't come with this particular facet of Joshua did not come with long hair and a beard. And different color eyes. His eyes are beautiful light in them. If you could look at the pictures I am, the light is magnificent. And his face is glowing. I don't know if you can tell that in the picture. Almost a sadness. Almost a sadness. I have this other picture of him also at the beach. Almost a sadness. I can't see in front of me because I'm holding the picture up. Almost a sadness in his eyes. He sent me those two pictures. I didn't know I was going to show them to you. I just happened to, looking through my files, I happened to see them the other day. Does that mean that that's what the Joshua is going to look like? Joshua is going to look like when I see him in Los Angeles? No, no. I think this is a totally different. You know, it's possible for Joshua to be on earth today, a facet of his to be on earth today in physical body, and Yeshua still be in the spiritual world. And the best way I can describe this is this glass. Think of this glass as though it was the spirit of Joshua. And just a facet of him, maybe this much, was poured out of the glass into another glass, and that facet came onto earth. Whereas the majority of Yeshua, from here down, was still in the spiritual world. That's actually how it works. Every one of us. Our spirit is so large that, well, we're in the spirit world. Our entire spirit's in the spiritual world. When we come to earth, only a facet of our spirit comes into earth. Maybe this much comes into us, and the rest of our spirit is still on the other side. I mean, not the other side, but in the spiritual world. Does any of this make any sense to you? Raise your hand if it makes sense to you. Well, that's what some of you are saying. How can he tell if I raise his hand, if I raise my hand? Okay, I'm not going to go there. I can't tell if you raise your hand. I know, you know I'm teasing you. You know I'm teasing you about raising your hand. But I do wonder how many of you understand what I'm saying and how many of you are saying, I don't have a clue what he's saying. And others saying, that makes a lot of sense. Let me go on to the next question. Is Mary Magdala one of the colleagues Jess was working with in the correction of 2,000 years of distortions? And the answer is no. Mary Magdala of Magdala, which is excellent. You know, Mary Magdalene was from Magdala. That question was asked by Corbana. Corbana, a brother in Africa. Corbana, you someday I wish you would fly to the United States and come to one of our gatherings. I almost said show. Truly, brother, I would love to meet you in person. I'd love to meet all of you. But at times, you know, even the fact you say Mary of Magdala rather than call her Mary Magdalene, pointing out the fact that she was Mary Magdala from the city of Magdala, and that's why they called her Mary Magdalene. Anyway, he asked the question: was he one of the colleagues Joshua was working with to make the correction? No, Mary was not a master. Mary was not an apostle. She was not a teacher. She was a disciple. She was a pupil, coming from the ancient word disciples. She was a pupil and a person who loved Joshua as a friend, and he loved her as a friend. There was a tremendous spiritual love between them, not a carnal love. They were never married. They never had children. I know we're going back in that question again last week. But there was a tremendous spiritual love, friendship between them. And she was a disciple. She was a pupil of his. She was not an apostle. You never heard her called the Apostle Mary. So she was not one of those that he was working with in order to correct, then or now to correct the distortions that were made. The next question was by Bunick again. This was, she's talking a long one. She's making reference, first of all, to something Randy said, something Jay said. She's welcoming Judith back, and she's our ambassador. She was welcoming back Judith to our site, and John H. And she made reference to something Jay said. And finally, way down the last paragraph, she says the following: I believe that Paul didn't know everything there was to know about Joshua and his private life, and that Nick may not know to this day. And I agree with Tamion, who happens to live in Portland, only about 20 minutes from me. And I agree with Tamion, and we've had lunch several times, and I agree with Tamion, it doesn't matter. Details about Joshua's birth, life, death, and resurrection are ultimately beside the point. What matters are the messages and teachings that change the world and continue to change and affect the world and each of us today. The promise matters that each of us has the potential to do what Joshua did and greater things, that we all have the presence of God inside of us, and it's our job to connect with that, surrendering our egos and our drives and the drive of our lives to take back seat, let the presence take the wheel and guide and direct our lives, revealing the ultimate life purpose. Love, joy, peace, harmony, forgiveness, compassion, good cheer. So we become a one who we are. Others, we do that. Once we do that, we get it. Yes, I agree with you, Bonnie. It's true. Paul didn't know everything. Going back to your first sentence, I believe that you said when you saw Paul didn't know everything that was was happening in Joshua's in his private life. That is true. Paul didn't know everything. Who does know everything about someone else's 100% about the person's private life? And that Nick, meaning me, may not know to this day, which is true. I don't. I do know that Joshua and Mary and Magdala loved each other spiritually and were very, very close friends. And she was a pupil. She was a disciple, a pupil, and not an apostle. and that there was no carnal relationship between them. I do know that, but there's many other things I don't know. That Joshua might have had some other woman in his life besides Mary. Mary wasn't the only woman in his life. He had hundreds and hundreds of women in his life that were disciples, that were pupils of his, that loved him and that he loved them. And maybe he was, I know he never got married, but he could have possibly had a close relationship, intimate relationship with one of those other women. I don't know. I just think I don't know about. But Mary certainly wasn't the only woman in his life, Mary Magdalene. So that's true, what you say. Okay, let's move on to the next question. This one came from Randy Rios. I too have a question for Joshua. Why do you need to go through a channel to talk to someone now, especially your old buddy Nick? Why does he need a channel? Randy, he doesn't need a channel. I'm not a clairvoyant, Randy, and that I cannot see into the spiritual world. Also, I'm not clairaudient. I can't hear into the spiritual world. But I do have claircognizance, and that information is given to me from the spiritual world. And I'm sure that many of the words I'm saying today are words that Joshua is helping me with my memory, helping me how to express myself, helping me how I choose the words I say, helping me try to communicate with you in an articulate way that doesn't sound too ambiguous and too controversial. I have a limited vocabulary like everybody else does, and I'm sure that many of the words I chose to express myself are words that are being given to me with the aid and support of Yeshua and other masters on the other side. But as far as my receiving channeled messages directly from Joshua, where he's talking to me as one who writes a letter, I don't have that ability. I have the ability of receiving messages cognizantly as I choose the words and teach his messages, because I'm an apostle of his, I'm a teacher of his messages. But I don't get letters from him, so to speak, as Sharon does. And that basically is the difference. It'd be like someone that can provide you with thoughts in your mind and expressions of knowledge, and allows you to express that knowledge and those thoughts in a semi-articulate manner, hopefully understood by others who have comprehension of those messages, as opposed to someone who literally gets messages they can put down in writing and say, here's a message, letter to Nick, where he actually says, I'm speaking to Nick and his team and his pupils and teachers. Because you are both. Some of you are my pupils, and some of you are my teachers, because I learn from every one of you. Yes, I understand. Okay. I think I've expressed that as well as I have to express it. And I don't think it benefits to belabor that issue. And hopefully you understand the distinction between my being claircognizant and getting information from Joshua. He helps me choose the words that I'm basically speaking to you right now, and the memories and the messages that he wants for me to convey to you, as opposed to a formal letter where he's addressing all of you and me too. The next question is from Randy. Did I just read the last one for you, Randy? Yeah. Okay, here's another one. Nick once mentioned that there was someone on the site that was once Mary of Magdala. If so, I'm sure we would all love to hear from you. I know I would. What's your fascination with Mary Magdala, Randy? You said you were fascinated by her. You have some kind of a crush on Mary McDonald. You have some kind of infatuation with her. In fact, you mentioned you did. I think in some post you posted about a week and a half ago. You said you have an infatuation with her. No, I don't believe that I should mention who other people. We have many people on the site that are an aspect of someone that lived 2,000 years ago. Many people. I can guarantee you hundreds of people on this site, hundreds that are watching right now, that are an aspect of someone who lived 2,000 years ago. In fact, I think someone posted to the site today in reference to that and acknowledged that 2,000 years ago they were an aspect of someone that lived 2,000 years ago. But I'm not going to start pointing people out. I'm not. I don't think it's right. I think there's other people that will say, well, how about me? Why didn't you mention me? I can't. I say, okay, everybody stand up who's wearing a red dress today. And I point out to all those who are wearing a red dress, and they say, well, how about us who are wearing white dresses? Aren't we as good as those who are wearing red dresses? So I'm not going to do that, Randy, point out if some person on this thing. I'm not going to point out if some person on the site is indeed a facet of someone that lived 2,000 years ago, because it just creates problems. I will, so I'm not going to say, but I will tell you this, that not on the site, I have met the person who was who was Thomas. I met another person who claimed to be Thomas, and his wife books claim he's Thomas, which is not true. He was not Thomas 2,000 years ago. His spirit and soul did not live in the person that was Thomas 2,000 years ago. But I do know the person that was, and that's Michael Tamura, T-A-M-U-R-A. Michael Tamura, T-A-M-U-R-A. He is Japanese, American Japanese. He lives up at Mount Shasta. And if you want to Google his name, Michael Tamura, M-A-T-A-M-U-R-E. I've met Michael and his wife Daphne several times. And Michael indeed is the reincarnation of the Apostle Thomas. And I've met the person who is the reincarnation of the Apostle John. And he does not live in this part of the country. He is an American. For a while he was on a lecture circuit doing healing, rubbing setting stuff as the Beloved John. Went by that title, Beloved John. I always thought he shouldn't have gone by the word beloved, because kind of like, that's my saying, you're talking to beloved Nick. I don't think of myself that way, but his name in this lifetime is John also. So I asked him that one time. He wanted to co-author a book with me, and I told him, no, I didn't want to do that. I said, write your own book, John. I had no reason to co-author with him. And he also appeared in one of my lectures once when I was speaking at someplace in the Midwest. He appeared in one of my lectures, and he and I did go out to dinner that night. And he is a healer, and he has a wonderful message, and he is the reincarnation of John. I don't know how you look up his. I don't know what his website is. You could look up Beloved John. You probably get about 20 different blogs of people claiming they're the Beloved John, including Archon Ray, whose real name is Kevin Ryerson. Kevin Ryerson claimed that he also was a reincarnation of John, which he was not. And he wrote Shirley MacLaine's Out on a Limb. He was in Shirley MacLaine's book, and he claims that he also channels a spirit called Archon Ray, A-H-T-U-N, separate word R-H-E, or R-A, A-H-T-U-N, separate word R-E. Kevin Ryerson is famous. I've met Kevin. I've had dinner, I've had lunch with him. I spent a day with him. Fascinating person. I've met him maybe 3 or 4 times. But he says he's a reincarnation of the Apostle John, and that he channels John, channels and actually speaks. And said, this is John speaking. Same voice, same personality as Kevin Ryerson, which is fun-loving, wonderful human being, beautiful guy. But and when he's Aten Ray, he also channels Aten Ray, a 3,000-year-old entity, master, same personality as Kevin Ryson has, and Kevin's fine. I got into a little copywriting argument one day over somebody that was a follower of his, and I said that I'm going off on a tangent, but I don't want to go there. I got an argument about what Kevin channels and who he doesn't channel, but he claims he channeled John also. He calls beloved John, and I don't believe he does, but he doesn't watch the show, so I don't care if he gets upset at me, because I would tell him to his face I don't think he does. But he's a wonderful human being, and I love the guy. Okay. We're doing well, 5:37. So we have another 7 minutes before it's an hour. The next question was from Judith D. For Joshua, an update on the apostles, which, if any, are currently on earth. We've already discussed that one, so I don't have to answer that question. Good question, Judith. I just happened to pick out the other question before yours. Thank you for posing a question. I really appreciate it. I really do. I really, truly appreciate those of you that send me questions. I would much rather do a show like this, where you can tell that there's no pre-rehearsal, there's no prepared presentation, there's no reading. I'm not reading a monitor like the president of and some politicians do. I'm addressing you from my heart, my soul, words that are given to me also by spirit, by Joshua sometimes, and by my soul memory. And I'd much rather do a show like this. I could go on for hours and hours and hours if you gave me enough questions. But I also know I'm sensitive to your time too, that I shouldn't take up more than an hour. This next question came from John H. It does say his last name here, but I don't. It's John H, which then is H-A-N, but I don't. My email is different than yours, where I can see the entire name, where you only see the John H part. John asked the question, Nick, I'd like to pose a question. Did Joshua truly issue the 2 new commandments as recorded in the New Testament? I'll paraphrase for the sake of brevity. He says, number 1, love one another. Number 2, love God with your whole heart and soul. The answer opens up innumerable follow-up questions, but I'm trying to abide by the rules. For now, thanks, John H. John, I really appreciate your not asking more questions at this moment than the 1. First of all, I don't call them 2 new commandments. Joshua issued the 2 new commandments. Joshua never made any commandment to us. Joshua only shared with us what he felt would make us closer to becoming at one with Christ consciousness and God. He never made any commandment to us. He never said, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that, thou shalt not do this. He never said that. He never made a commandment. But then you go on and describe it, where he said, did he say love one another? Yes, he did. Secondly, love God with your whole heart and soul. Yes, he did. He did say, oftentimes, and he says it today, love one another. Love God with all your heart and soul. And I've said that too. And Joshua said that through me, where he's let me say those words in my books and to you, that we should all love one another. That's what universal love is. That we should love God with our whole heart and soul. And that's what happens when you become one with God in Christ consciousness. And that you do love one another. You do love God with all your heart and soul. Indeed, Joshua did say those words 2,000 years ago. He said them today through me, through my clear cognizance. But he never said it as a commandment. He said instead as a way of life that he suggests that we live in order so we can ascend and become at one with God and Christ consciousness as we continue on our own journey. Good question, though. And this next one from Mariana, all the way in Australia. You're still asking me questions. You asked me for questions for about 45 minutes before we went on live today, Mariana. Ginger ale, Angostura bitters. I recommend it strongly. Ginger and Angostura is incredible taste, as well as great for your digestive. There's nothing wrong with my digestive system. In fact, I went out and ran 4 miles yesterday down at Lake Oswego High School. I would have ran 5 except it started raining harder. That's Tammy Ann and Linda, who lives also in Oregon. Not Linda O, but the other Linda L. Linda Bakers? Linda, who lives in Oregon. No, Linda Bakers, you live in Massachusetts, Arlington, Massachusetts. Anyway, we have a number of different Lindas with us. We have one Linda that lives in Aloha, Oregon, about 25 minutes from here. We have another Linda that lives in Massachusetts, not too far from where I grew up, was raised in Chelsea. And we have another Linda O, and all 3 of you are watching the show today. So say hi to each other, Lindas. And there's probably about 50 other Lindas watching too that don't post. Okay, this is from Mariana. I've been thinking about your show from last night. You mentioned that it took a lot of energy for Joshua. Oh no, this is from David, I'm sorry. Oh, I see. My printout has more than one person. Let me answer David's question. Let's see what it says. David says, I've been thinking about your show last night. You mentioned that it took a lot of energy for Jesus to reduce the vibrational frequency to materialize in this physical plane. Do you really think it's such a big deal for Jesus to materialize in this low frequency? Or any frequency he might choose. What about God or the Holy Spirit or angels? If Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit are one and the same, why would there be any such limitation for that? First of all, every time you say Jesus, I can't identify with Joshua. You might as well say Herman, or I just can't. It's like you're talking about somebody else. You might as well say Herman, or you might as well say Guna, or Pinocchio. I mean, excuse me, Pinocchio. I'm sorry. Pinocchio is a Italian word for meaning somebody who's gay. Nightclubs called Pinocchios. I meant to say Pinocchio, meaning the wooden doll with the long nose. I just can't identify when you call him Jesus. I just can't. So I'm going to change it again. Let me say the question again, so I can concentrate on what you're asking me. I've been thinking about your show from last night, which you would have meant last Sunday. You mentioned that it took a lot of energy for Joshua to reduce his vibrational frequency to materialize on this physical plane. Do you really think there's any big deal for Joshua to materialize into a new frequency, or to any frequency he might choose? Yes, I think that if he's in spirit, which he is, he's not in a physical body. Again, we're not talking about the aspect of him that's a physical body today. We're talking about his other soul, the rest of his soul, the rest of him, 90% of who he is, not the 10% aspect, but the 90%. Or maybe the aspect is 5% of him. The 95% of him that's still in the spiritual world. To be able to take that incredible soul and to be able to materialize? Yes, totally. Totally. Let me give you an example. Talking about the one who's living in Kuala Lumpur, who's an aspect of him. He had a friend by the name of Marie Gaudet. I believe I called it Anne on my book, but her real name is Marie Gaudet. She's from France. That's Marie, and the last name is Gaudet, G-A-R-D-E-T. And Marie told me, she said, Nick, I would be in Hong Kong with him, or I'd be in Hangzhou, or Wuxi, or Xi'an, or Peking. And he spoke, not only did he speak every dialect, she's speaking now of the one that has an aspect of Joshua, the one I refer to as Emmanuel via Salvador. She said, he'd say to me, I'll meet you in Hong Kong. And she said, I would fly into Hong Kong, and I'd say, you flying me? He said, no, I'll meet you there. And he'd already be there when I got there, even though I take the first flight out. And one time, she says, one time, she met him in a hotel and where she would stay, and she had no idea where he stays. He would never tell her where he stays. She suspected he stayed in the spiritual world because he never slept. She never saw him eat a meal. Sometimes he'd go to a dinner and he'd pretend he was eating, and she never saw him sleep. I mean, she had no knowledge of ever sleeping overnight. And she said that he showed up one time, and she was staring at me. He said, "Why are you staring at me?" She said, "Because you're 3 inches taller than the last time I saw you." And he started laughing and said, "Oh," he said, "I didn't do that on purpose." And he said, "Wait a second." And next thing you know, he was back to the height that she normally was. She said she was absolutely taken back because the only time that ever happened. So what I suspect happens is that the way he traveled, this other aspect of Joshua, he would go from China into the spiritual world and back again into physical body in China, in Hong Kong. And this one time, he just apparently made an error and came back with the same looks and everything, but came back 3 inches taller, and he corrected himself immediately. So I think he can take any body he wants to, because he took, at that time, she told me that this man looked to her like he was in his middle 30s. She said she often saw him wearing jeans. This picture was his passport picture, by the way. This was his passport picture. He told me that he used for his passport. She said that most of the time he wore jeans. He was dressed casual. Oftentimes with just a short sleeve shirt, because they were in a warm climate. A short sleeve pullover jersey, usually black. And he looked like he was in his middle 30s. And the skin was very, very olive colored. So again, this is his passport picture where he was trying to look more formal. But visualize this man, aspect of Joshua, wearing jeans and wearing a short sleeve shirt, black. And rather than the passport picture, let's say he had a big, beautiful smile on his face. I have no idea what a smile would look like because I've only seen 2 pictures with them. Both of them were very somber looking. But you can see this in his eyes and his face. They're shining. There's a very special person. I mean, there's a light around him in the picture. So yeah, I think, David, to answer your question, that it would be a very, very difficult transition for Joshua, not the aspect of Joshua, but the entire Joshua, his entire 95% spirit. If just 5% an aspect of him has to come back and came back accidentally looking 3 inches taller, 2 inches taller than he normally does, yeah, he can come back, take any image he wants to. And it would be difficult to make that energy come from the other side of the veil onto Earth, as we're talking about doing in our show at our gathering on May 27th. Well, it's 5:49. We've actually gone an hour now. I wasn't going to do a healing today. Not because I don't want to. I just, the words become repetitious. Someone might listen to my healings and saying, well, those are some similar words that Nick said last week or last month or last year. Because you can only say so many words no matter how I choose to phrase it. But I will go ahead and try to do a short healing. There's no such thing as a short healing or a long healing. There's either a healing or there isn't a healing. I have to keep adjusting my hands because everything's reversed for me. I'm looking at you. Up is down and down is up, and there's a 5-second delay. And my left hand is my right hand. This is my right hand I'm moving, which I'm looking on the screen. It looks like my left hand. So it's always a challenge for me when I do this. I found out in church today that the reason in the country of Cambodia, They don't do this when they pray. They do this in the shape of a lotus. So I'm going to do this, which is an open lotus. Dear Lord, we thank you for all the gifts you've given us, for all the blessings you bestow on us. The words are repetitious because I say them every week when I do my show. But you know that my heart and soul and the hearts and soul of every one of our brothers and sisters, your children, that's watching the show, are grateful for everything you do for us. The beautiful sunsets, the beautiful sunrises, the beautiful oceans, the silent roar of the oceans we walk along its beaches. The Olympics, the beautiful, beautiful people. We who are in America look on television, we can't distinguish. But we can't even distinguish who's an American, who's a Russian, who's a Canadian, who's from Switzerland, who's amazing. I watched last night an Asian person win a skating race for Russia, who 4 years ago skated for some other country. That's how universal we've become. The Russian people were screaming and yelling and cheering for him and waving the flag. And 4 years ago, he raced for some other country. And for somehow or other, they gave him, he had the right to this time, 4 years later, to race for the Russians. He came in first place, and second place came another Asian, who also had raced 4 years ago from another country. I don't even understand the rules, but dear God, what it really shows is that every one of us are your children. We're all brothers and sisters. And as you watch the television, the Olympics in Russia, coming from Russia, you recognize we're all brothers and sisters. The love and the respect they have for each other. The different Olympian athletes. Because we're all one. We're all your children, dear God. Just have to be born in a different part of the world. In a slightly different culture. We're almost all speaking the same language now. English is almost universal. So thank you, dear Lord, for giving us all those blessings. But dear Lord, there's some of your children that need your help. There's some of your children, dear Lord, that need your help. They have illnesses. Some of the illnesses are on the outside of their body from injuries they might have acquired, or maladies of their body, and some are internal. Some can be associated with compulsions, obsessions, addictions, and some can be internal diseases such as cancer, diabetes, and muscular dystrophy. Dear God, we ask that you heal your children. Show your compassion and your love for your children by healing them, dear God. Thank you, dear God, for everything you do for us, all the blessings that you give us. Thank you for letting us meet together in this gathering and for allowing us to have this chapel. And yes, God bless you, every one of you. Every one of you. Namaste to you. Namaste. As you continue your journey. I'll see you next Sunday. My computer's going to say goodbye to you now.
Goodbye.